younger generations seem to be taking responsibility, ownership, going back to the memories on the knowledge and also the struggles.
Their food is great. It's traditional, it's native, it's ancestral, it's sustainable, organic, seasonable. This is the model. I do it because, I am a healer and it's taken me a long time to own that. But I do it through food. I want to say it was political violence that occurred because it was an attack on the body, it was attack on the memory. And which then, back then we weren't using the words, it was a racial issue, but it was.
In the time that I was involved in human rights and activism and the Truth Commission in Peru, memory was something that the majority of the citizens were not willing to do. Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of Chesani's Kitchen Table Conversations. The healing power of food is rooted in science, and nutrition is at the core of our physical and mental health. But is it possible to heal a complex experience such as inferiority complex and shame through remembering our ancestral food ways and reclaim our identity pride? What if healing could begin not in a clinic, but in the kitchen? In this episode, we explore how food is far more than sustenance. It's memory, medicine, and a path home to ourselves. We are honored to be joined by Dr. Claudia Serrato, an indigenous culinary anthropologist, public scholar, and traditional Mesoamerican plant-based chef, whose work sits at the powerful intersection of nourishment and identity. During the 2024 Smithsonian Folk Festival in Washington, D.C., which was dedicated to Indigenous voices of the Americas, I bumped into her cooking presentation of cacao amaranth protein bar, a recipe that sparked both joy and reflection, and had become ever since my one and only protein bar. With wisdom rooted in both academic research and ancestral knowledge, Dr. Serrato invites us to reconsider how returning to our food ways can restore what colonization attempted to erase: pride, connection, and deep cultural memory. Our conversation takes shape around the experience, revealing how food can help mend what history was trying to sever. With Dr. Serrato's guidance, we will explore how reclaiming traditional foodways can heal not only our bodies, but also the inherited shame and inferiority complex shaped by colonial narratives. This episode is an invitation to remember who we are, one bite at a time. Good afternoon, Dr. Serrato. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us today. We are so honored to have you, and we are so willing to learn from you, your stories, your experiences, and your knowledge, especially.
Thank you, Paula. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Um, let's start with one curiosity that I know it's mentioned in your website and also in some of the other vast interviews that you'd had, but I was captured the minute that I read your combination of academics and social studies and your PhD, and how that started out of having the opportunity for you to, or you having the opportunity to cook with your elders. And you tell us the story of that um, enlightenment and also the process of that inspiration to say, oh, I want to take this knowledge and therefore the pride in my ancestry and my ancestors' cooking recipes and the knowledge behind cook and kitchens,
Mm-hmm.
and bring it to the social studies.
Yes. It's a good question. Because as academics, sort of forced and we merge ourselves as we're learning to take on a track and it's very textbook, it's very theory based. Yes, we learn methods along the way, but one thing that really I want to say made sense for me was that I viewed academia as something that I was just doing to empower myself. I'm a firm believer knowledge resides in our livelihoods, knowledge resides in what we do and who we surround ourselves with. And so growing up, I always was around my elders. My parents had me at a very young age, so I had grandparents, I had great grandparents and I was always with them. And so I was very curious. And my elders just always spent time in the kitchen. Like that is where we sat, that's where we conversed, that's where consejos were given. And that's where my grandmothers will pull up a banquito and have me stand on it and help them. So as we're cleaning nopales or as we're playing with masa, there was always just a conversation. This was happening in Spanish, and I was invited to trust my body. Me, I always ask the question, well, what does my nose tell me? What does my mouth tell me? The way I'm feeling this. And so when I entered into academia, I was taught to view the world very objectively. And I thought, well, that's not fair because then I'm only, really referencing the world from what I see and what I hear. But what about what I smell, what I taste, what I touch? And then I learned that what I was really referencing was about embodiment, embodied knowledge, which then would be subjective. And so as I began to really understand my place in the world and how important food was to me and my cultural identity, I realized that, in my studies, because I studied ethnic studies, and we learned about food justice and the environment and protest art and the Chicano movement. And I always, at the end, had the question, what about food? And folks were like, well, what about food? And I was like, well, food was, colonized. Food, is we want to heal, then how do we heal from colonization if we're still eating the colonizers' foods or their food ways? And so that to me was something that I realized was missing. And yes, there was like food studies was emerging, but it wasn't from a culturally like rooted, Mexicana, Chicana perspective, looking at, global food structures and that's all very important. But I was really concerned about ancestral memory. I was concerned about, if we lose these foods, if we lose these recetas, if we lose these saberes de saber, right? And where does that leave us in terms of, wanting to reclaim and heal our sense of self? Okay, I was attending an elder talk, and the elders looked at us and, us academics, and very, very clearly said, if your work and your research is not interested in answering and looking for and searching for ancestral knowledge and ancestral memory and bringing it back so we don't lose it, then what worth is your work? And that to me was like creator talking to through these elders telling me it is your responsibility to help the people remember and help them remember through our culinary art, through our ancestral foodways, through our abuelita knowledge. And so then I decided that I was going to, pursue that as my studies. And my question was, how does ancestral memory, right, reside in this food? How does it manifest? How does it transmit? And why is that important? Because I was working and cooking alongside many colleagues throughout the United States, particularly many Native chefs, I was able to work very closely with the Native American Culinary Association, and we decided as a colectiva to really address this to help our communities heal, right? And so, but we always accredit that yes, we do have knowledge from, academia and other resources, but the true knowledge is our abuelas. The true knowledge keepers are our elders. And I realized that our home cooking is also our ancestral technologies. And it's very important, in terms of the work that we want to do in relation to cultural continuity, survival, resistance, and it's also part of.
Yeah. Thank you. You've mentioned a key concept that immediately brought to my human rights studies,
Mm,
memory. That's the initial part in order to go to reconciliation and before that, justice. But I want to unite memory to now the intergenerational dialogue based on what do you think has enabled that currently younger generations cooking or interested in either professional cooking or kitchen cooking, family cooking, uh, enables them to or inspires them to reclaim pride in their indigenous ancestors and ancestry and knowledge that was something that I can tell you my great grandparents and my grandparents and my parents didn't even thought possible. As
mhm.
as closer or as much as you could show your European descendant, that would be better. That was your where your pride was.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I can relate to that too. My family comes from Mexico. We come from Michoacán, Zacatecas, and San Luis Potosí. And their entryway into the United States was through Baja California, was through Mexicali, and their goal was to assimilate. And we living in East Los Angeles, which is considered a little Mexico here in California. They saw that, I took on a new identity, right? I was no longer just Mexicana. I was a hyphenated Mexican, right? Mexican American. And so, but they also wanted to instill la cultura. They wanted to still instill the tradition. And so they came to realize that maybe assimilation is their survival mechanism as adults. But for me, it was important that they instilled a sense of cultural pride. And what I'm seeing now, even as a profesora with the younger generation, is that or young adults, um, acculturation is great, but like let's evolve it because we have technology, we have, access to reels and TikTok, right? And so now there's a lot more exposure. Like, la abuelita de la cocina de Michoacán, they were saying something like she has over, I don't know, million followers than somebody who's part of the mainstream white culture. And again, because it's reminding people of their abuelitas. And so this cultural sense of pride has evolved where now it's becoming something new. And what I'm seeing is that there's this resilient spirit, right? This activist spirit. Gloria Anzaldúa refers to this as like spiritual activism. And so I feel that there's also access to ceremony. There's access to canciones. There's access to el tambor, right? So it's bringing people back and helping them remember, hold on. I'm not just this Mexican and hyphenated American, but I am Purepecha. I am Zapotec, right? Living in this urban, city. I'm an urban native, but what does that mean? And how do I not, again, lose myself? And because there's been so much, remembrance, I want to say people are remembering their cultural heritage foods, that this younger generation is like, you know what? I have access, I have resources. Um, I don't have the struggles that my parents had. So then it is now my responsibility to make sure that we continue this legacy. So for me, what I'm seeing is like there is this really like deep like sense of like it's not it's beyond pride. It's like they understand this as a responsibility. Because again, see, if we don't have our foods and our ways of knowing, then who are we? And that's scary. So I think it might even come from a place of fear. Like I don't want to raise kids who don't know frijoles, who don't eat tortillas, right? And I hear that with my third generation students. I even have some students that are that generation, and they say to me, "I'm so disconnected from my cultura, and but I want to learn." And I ask them, "Well, do you have a tortilla press at home?" "Yes, I do, profe." I'm like, "Do you eat tortillas?" "Yes, I do." I'm like, "Well, you're very connected because if you were not eating that, right, like you wouldn't have this." this conexión to your ancestors. Do you eat nopales? Yes. And what I'm seeing though, because there's also a huge, foodie culture, so a lot of the young indigenous youth and young adults, they're becoming very innovative, right? So now they're making, it's not just nopales con chile guajillo. Now they're making, nopal candy, piñon milk, right? So they're kind of rethinking the culinary landscape and reclaiming it on their own terms. When I facilitate my workshops, the young adults and the youth that are there, they're there to learn, but they're also there to be inspired. They're not there as spectators, right? They're there to like, they see this as spiritual healing work. And many of them want to be promotoras and they want to do it by decolonizing their diet, decolonizing their taste buds. But they question it. What does that mean? And then, so when you begin to ask that question, what does that mean? And you get the answer, and it sparks, right? This, I think it's maybe ancestral rage, and I don't see that as a bad thing. It
Yes.
sparks that fire in them to be like, I gotta do something about this, right? Like this is again legacy work. I see that, these youth have been fed enough to remember. I remember these tastes. I remember my abuela. I remember the smell. And if it's no longer part of their home, they're like, wait a minute, no, we need to bring it back. And they're bringing it back and some,
Mm.
which is great because there's a lot of pride in that. And I see a lot more generations making tamales and doing nix tamal, and that's hard. That's laborious work. I
Mhm.
see a lot of activism, and by activism, I also mean not just out in the streets, but I'm talking about gardening. I'm talking about like here, that's my elderberry, returning the natives back to our homes, onto the land. And I see that more and more, especially here in Los Angeles.
Mhm. And I want to go back to memory because I know now, listening to you, the connection with responsibility, right? In the time that I was involved in human rights and activism and the Truth Commission in Peru, memory was something that the majority of the citizens were not willing to do. They wanted to forget about the past and let's move forward, right? That's easy to say. But the fact that you are mentioning that we are more, I mean, that younger generations seem to be taking responsibility, ownership, going back to the memories on the knowledge and also the struggles, the race struggle to be treated in the same or with the same dignity that any other citizen.
Hmm.
It's something that inspires me because I always said that whenever I tell people or friends who are not involved in these things that uh, food, what they eat, is absolutely political, they doubt it, right? The
Yeah.
people, yeah. And for me, it's like, the fact that you live in a city and that when you go to your Whole Foods you can find vegetables that are of good quality, or products that are of good quality, is absolutely political, because if you were living somewhere else you wouldn't have access to that. And the fact that now our younger generations and more of us want to focus on nurturing rather than on just putting something on the table or in our mouth, we are more conscious, we are more aware uh, on the actions that we need to do in order to not survive like our grandparents,
Hmm.
live. And to live is a right and it's political. So
Yes.
Um, can can you expand on these two aligned concepts, memory, responsibility?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that comes to mind, though, is Rebecca Earl's work. She did a whole piece on looking at the Spanish colonizer body, and really addresses this as a racial issue that occurred when early colonialism happened, like in Mesoamerica, Mexico. The Spanish arrived and they did not want to consume any of the native foods because they believed that by consuming the indigenous foods, it would make them inferior. So they wanted to uphold their superiority. They also believed their foods were superior foods. And that mindset worked its way into the pueblos eventually, where even some of, the indigena people were like, oh, I don't know if I want to eat my corn. I think I want to eat the wheat tortillas de trigo, and that was all a political, I want to say it was political violence that occurred because it was an attack on the body, it was attack on the memory. And which then, back then we weren't using the words, it was a racial issue, but it was. What I have also come to understand is that memory is alive by itself, right? It is a living entity. And memory refuses to be forgotten. I've been told that food chose me. I used to think I came to food. An elder said, no, 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 mijita. Food chose you. Now you have a responsibility. And so then that makes me a political warrior. Because if I am enacting, right, what my ancestors wanted, that means I am doing this as true rebellion to the colonizer foodways and how we see it today in our modern markets, right? Like this is a global resistance. It is, global indigeneity at its finest because many of us um, are doing that memory work. Some of us have never lost it. Some of us don't need to reclaim it or remember, going back to that memory because it's always been there. And so I do see cooking as a site of racial healing because of having this, political, spiritual, historical, anthropological awareness that brought about the changes that we I endure and see today in our markets, in our kitchens, spiritual, political repair work. And our food is our medicine. It's how we heal, it's how we sustain. We also keep the land alive. Again, going back to our youth, going back to our communities, they're coming to understand that.
Mhm.
And some of them have that kind of awareness and they don't speak about it in terms of, oh, we need to decolonize, we need to re-indigenize. We've come to realize, no, that is why we have UNESCO who has said, actually, la cocina mexicana, especially those from Michoacán, damn, their food is great. It's traditional, it's native, it's ancestral, it's sustainable, organic, seasonable. This is the model. And we're realizing there's many more communities that eat that way, that really never played with, the colonial political project.
Mhm, mhm. And I love when I heard some of your interviews about health, right? And what was how your grandparents started having issues, or your parents as well, having heart issues or health issues because of the diet that they switched when they try to assimilate
Yes.
versus, yeah, that's super important. And I know that probably our younger generations do know that now.
And it's really interesting because I just came back from a ceremonia, right? So I was over at a cultural ceremony in Baja, and I was encargada in charge of the kitchen. So I made sure it was all native foods. I brought in the bison, I brought in the salmon, I brought in the wild rice, I brought in the piñones and the sunflower seeds and the amaranto. And I had this elder, and it was her family. This elder came up to me, and at the end, she estaba llorando, she was crying. And I was kind of like, oh my God, what's going on here? Y me dice, I'm a diabetic. I have to take 2 insulin shots a day. Since I've been at this ceremony, not one time did I have to take those insulin shots. And at that moment, she started crying, I started crying, and we hugged. And she says to me, Tú me curaste. You healed me. And I told her, no, mamita. I said, I am here to be of service. The food healed you. And it's all of these foods that are indigenous foods. I said, yes. And they're local because they were localized also. I made sure to integrate the local landscape. And so, it was beautiful because there was intergenerational healing because they had a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, la esposa, el esposo y la abuela. And you just saw it across them. And they were just so happy. They were just affirmed. And it was beautiful because then they realized that their epigenetic memory was activated. So my work as a cocinera, as a chef, as an anthropologist is to help activate, right? Help turn that ancestral memory on, which then you're like, wait a minute, I know this food. I don't know how I know it, but I know it. And let me continue to consume it because it's healing me physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally.
Oh,
And and that's what's important with healing, right? Because we're not just healing the disease, right? So it helps restore that relationship to plants, that relationship to land. And I feel like that's another element of food justice, of environmental justice, right? Of, again, racial healing is also plant healing, land healing, even reproductive justice as well, right? Because we're healing, for those that are even, carrying life in them, right? We're feeding ourselves. The amniotic fluid is going to take on that flavor, so now you're training the taste buds of the next generation. They're gonna be born craving nopales and chile guajillo, and that's beautiful.
absolutely. Yes. I don't
Hmm.
know if Antonio has a question for you.
It's a pleasure to listen to you, Claudia. I'm so overwhelmed, and I know there's so many things to talk about. I am really nurtured by everything that you said. Thank you very much for being here and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Uh, I don't really have a question. I love that we've talked so many things about identity and storytelling, and something that came to my mind, it's a small story. I know my cat, for example, he is a domesticated cat, and maybe this sounds irrelevant, but sometimes he brings me animals to my house.
Mm-hmm.
So it's even if he's a domesticated cat, he still has this knowledge inside of him, even if he was born in an indoor house.
Yeah.
He wants to reward me for taking care of him
Oh,
somehow. So I think when I see this and he bring me these small presents, I think somehow deep inside of each one of us, we also have this identity that nature uh, has its ways, and but somehow we were gonna recognize that we are part of this land, we are part of this nature,
Mhm.
and it's so important to speak about all these subjects. I invite everyone also to see the all the resources that you have on your website.
Thank you.
maybe
I
I
love the videos that are shared from the Wiyot tribe. It tells a beautiful story of the connection with the food, with the seeds, with the seasons. Personally, when we talk about identity as well, I personally sometimes feel that I have lost my identity many times, and I'm sure young generations have felt that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in South America. I moved to the States when I was very young. And so when I lived in South America, my identity was not defined, I will say. When I moved to the States, my identity wasn't defined as well. I moved to Canada. I wasn't Canadian. I was something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you had that
Mm-hmm.
uh, with you because you come from a Mexican background.
Mm-hmm.
You live in LA and
Mm-hmm.
you moved to Seattle to
Mm-hmm.
continue your studies. So I
Yeah.
was wondering if you could share about a little bit about this uh, strength, I will say, that you have to bring from yourself somehow to
Yeah.
to recognize your own.
So, so for me, Because I was raised in el este de Los Angeles, which is East LA. I grew up thinking it was Little Mexico. Like when I was still a young girl, and we spent so much time visiting my abuela who lived in Mexicali because she never wanted to come over, even though she was from San Luis Potosí. She never wanted to come live in the States. And so I spent significant amount of time really in a very humble home, no running water, no electricity, so I had this different worldview that not a lot of people had. I'm a border child. Like we always went back and forth. I did have that privilege because I was born here in the States. And when I moved to Seattle, it was really beautiful because I talked to my elders and they said to me, you know what, Claudia, it's good that you go, because you're only around, Chicano indigenous people here in Los Angeles, and it's time that you learn about other culturas indígenas. And so when I went into Seattle, I went with the mentality of it's important for me to connect with other indigenous people. I realized that we all of us have a different, historical background. We all of us have our, our colonizer story. And so some of us are in different processes. There's so many segments to that, but it's also the same when it comes to so memory work. So we're all in different stages. And so being there and sharing space like in kitchens, some of us are very connected and some of us are not. And it was beautiful because we allowed food to be what brought us together. And so it came to the point where then I was asked to come teach and lead a class with the Muckleshoot community on how to rethink their menus, the public school system and other indigenous students. And so for me, I know being there, it just reaffirmed my indigeneity. And I was very open. I made sure to attend those indigenous events. I made sure to attend the pláticas and anything that was hosted by the native organizations out there. And so what I did learn is that there is more to, Chicanos. There is more to being an indigenous Mexican. We made friendships with Native Alaskans, right? So the Tlinkets, and I learned about their food ways where before I didn't understand, and I was able to have respect for their seal hunts and their whale hunts. It reaffirmed why this work is important because it's not just the people here in LA that are doing this work. It's the people in Seattle, it's the Pacific Northwest, it's Washington, Canada, Oregon, and then onward. And I realized, oh, this is like a national movement. And it's, it doesn't have the spotlight because we don't have the cameras. And like they say, the revolution will not be televised, but it's happening. And so I felt more affirmed because then when I came back to my community, I had I had established different relationships with plantitas that I didn't grow up eating, like wild rice, and I learned how to make pudding with it. I learned how to make a medley with it. I learned how to add my own sazon to it. Where when I offer it to my community, they're so thankful. They're like, wow, like you have put us in conversation with the prairies. You have put us in conversation with the Great Lake Nation, and it's through the food, right? And so now we have a different conocimiento of what it means to be indigenous, but more so, what does it mean to consume and invite our ancestral plant relatives into our homes and make it part of our diet? And I feel like that's what it did for me. It affirmed, my indigeneity. It affirmed my ancestral memory, and it gave me a purpose. And it helped me finish my PhD because I knew I had to do it, not just for myself and my family, but for my community. And that was the reason, that was my initial reason to do it because our communities we do need our doctoras and we do need our doctores. Um, and now, right, it just affirms what I've done and how I know what I know. And it's gained me some respect, which is great. But I don't do it for that reason. I do it because, I am a healer and it's taken me a long time to own that. But I do it through food. And really, it's me facilitating it, right? The food is doing the healing. I'm just here to facilitate it and create some good flavors and help us, activate our ancestral taste buds to crave this food, to want this food. I feel like there's nobody in this world who's going to take that away from me. Nobody in this world can come and try to debunk me and try to tell me otherwise because I'm very confident in the maneras that I have received knowledge and the way that I produce it as well.
Thank you so much,
You're
Dr. We
welcome.
don't want to take much of your precious time. Thank you for this healing as well. I don't know about Antonio, but it's already working. Yes, absolutely. And just one last comment from you. I observed your orgullo in your indigenous ancestry, but also that within your family, who um, instilled that in you? Who taught you this? Because I know that the difference between our humans is the ones who have a voice and never uh, allow anyone to shut down that voice, and to be proud of who we are is something rare,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. And being around my elders who are very just, they were there in the 70s, they were there in the front lines, they were there, really enacting change. They're in their 70s now and they bring on this energy. And I realized this is what has kept us doing this work is you got to be solid. You have to be solid and passionate. The palabra comes from my abuela Panchita, my dad. He was a very firm, very very solid. My mother, my grandfather, my abuela Yaya. I took a bits and pieces of them, right? Because they all helped raise me, and you become who you're raised by, and so. And then living in LA and just being, full of rage because, there's so many injustices here. You kind of like metabolize all that, right? And it fuels you. And so I just take that fuel and I've learned to redirect it. So that way I'm not an angry person, but I'm a passionate person who's ready to continue sharing the knowledge, empowering my community, but more so feeding the people.
You have come to a close cycle or
Yeah.
cycle as well, because we started trying to find out a good response for taking pride in our identity. But also, you've lastly mentioned the role of parenting and family to raising up and decolonizing our
Great.
mindset,
Great. Mm-hmm.
right? But in the case in which our parents or our families are not the ones who had that as their responsibility for different reasons,
Yes.
we now take the responsibility to become that those parents that maybe we didn't have, or
Yes.
family in which all these things were discussed and talked from
Mm.
a place of pride and orgullo, and
Yes.
reclaim that now for ourselves and do the work, because it takes responsibility to educate ourselves. We don't necessarily have to go to a college or a university, so thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I appreciate it. Have a good one, both of you.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you. Have a
Gracias.
great evening. Muchas gracias a ti.